So there we go. That is our quick Jade Dagger. So let's set to smooth again. But if I go into edit mode, where you can see how many vertices there are and all this, this is why I can't really work from this. This is too much. Much too much. So this thing right here has, let's see, 26,945 vertices on 53,886 faces, of which all of them are triangles. So yeah, this would be a disaster if I tried to render this thing. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring this back over, and as you can see, if I go into like wireframe mode, there's a lot of areas where this does not line up well. If you go into solid mode, you can see where it sticks out and such. So first I'm going to name this. So plane, I'm going to call it high poly blade, and this is just going to be called blade. Okay. And then I'm going to do, well, first I'm going to do this. Alright, so I put another subsurface modifier on it, and then I'm going to do, where'd it go? Shrink wrap. So shrink wrap will push this around so that it adheres more closely to the high poly blade. So if I hide the high poly blade, you can see that I've done this, but underneath I still have all this nice clean geometry, right? Which is great, because that means when I go into rendered view, it won't blow up in my face. Alright, so at this point I think it's probably a good time to save, because Blender has a history of crashing. Oh wait, why am I calling it Blender? We're going to call it Obsidian. There we go. Save as a Blender file. Alright, so if I turn back on high poly blade, you can see that this dagger here is actually pretty closely adhering to the surface here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to UV unwrap this. So let's pull this out over here. Okay. And I want this line all the way through, so we're going to mark seam. And I want this going all the way around. Yep, we're going to mark seam. Oops. What am I doing wrong? There we go, mark seam. And just to be sure, I'm going to remove doubles again. Alright, go to my UV image editor, unwrap. We're going to extend this along the y-axis from, I think, the 2D cursor. Alright, so now this is taking up as much of the UV grid as possible. So this is called the UV grid because it has U and V axes instead of X, Y, and Z like the 3D space. And so it's used, if I select a single face, you can see that face's location on the UV grid. So if I use an image texture on this, instead of just this blank UV grid, then the engine knows to use that texture to affect this part of the model for certain reasons. So most specifically, I can't talk today, what we're going to try and do is get a normal map. So go back to Cycles Render because Blender Render, because Blender Renders is actually able to do normal mapping. Hit new, let's go, oops, 4 times 2. So we're going to do 2048, 2048. Doesn't matter what color it is, and we're going to call it Obsidian Norm, or Obsidian Normal. Okay, so you can see that this is how this is mapping onto this image. So we're also going to put it in here because, well, Blender texture baking is a stupid process, and I hate it, but you have to do it. Alright, we'll save this. Obsidian Normal, we're going to save it in pictures as Obsidian normal. Okay. Alright, so next we need to select this, shift select the blade. This needs to be unhidden. Okay. Tab into here. Go to bake. Normals. Bake for multi-res. Actually, no, we don't need to bake for multi-res. I forgot we weren't using multi-res because multi-res is now stupid because Blender added dynamic topology. So don't use multi-res. Okay, select it to active. This should be okay. I'm gonna, let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna drop that margin to 3. Well, no, 4, because it likes to be in powers of 2. One of the things that you learn, you know, using things like Blender is that, yeah, computers really like powers of 2, as you might have already guessed. Alright. So, that was pretty quick, and if you take a look at it, it's got this nice, funky look to it, which is what I want. Okay, so, hop back into Cycles Render. You can hide the high poly blade again, because I don't need it. Although actually first, before I hide it, I'm going to parent it to the blade. So that way, if I move the blade around, the high poly blade will stay there. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want the shrink wrap to keep working. Because if I don't do it, if I just move the high poly blade, then the shrink wrap will stop working, basically. Yeah, so if I select this, yeah, you can see how the shrink wrap is going crazy. Whereas, yeah, see, it's like, oh no, what do I do? But now, since I just have the blade selectable, and I can hide the high poly blade, no problems. Although, now there does seem to be a problem. What is going on? Why are you not shrink wrapping? That was weird, but whatever. Okay, so now we're actually going to work on the material. But first, I want to get this origin point towards the middle. So I'm going to cursor to selected to make it center of this loop. And then I'm going to set origin to 3D cursor. And then I'm going to set this back to 0, 0. Okay. Good. So Obsidian is a kind of glass. And we are going to be using a glass shader. Surprise, surprise. So we'll call this Obsidian. Use nodes, and we're going to change this to glass. I've already looked up the index of refraction for Obsidian, and it's 1.48. Alright, so that is the correct index of refraction. Yeah, multi-res is the worst, dude. You are correct. Multi-res is terrible. So, yeah, the powers of 2 thing is important. So yeah, if you're ever doing 3D art and you need to know, you need some kind of glass materials, anything that bends light when it passes through it, you need to look up the index of refraction. Otherwise, you're going to get it wrong. Okay, so, oh, and I should save this before I forget. Save over. There we go. So back to the node editor. Okay. Switch this to texture. I'm going to input a texture coordinate, or not texture coordinate, sorry. Input a image texture, that's what I want. Textures of, are you not finding it for me? Stupid program. Used to do that. Maybe it was an add-on I had. I have a lot of add-ons, but there we go. Obsidian normal. Okay, so you can see that this is somewhat more detailed than just the shrink back modifier, which is good. Okay, so this is going to be a non-color data object, and we need a vector normal map. we go. And why is it doing that? On color. Normal. It's not really how it should be looking. Okay, that's a little better. It was just too strong. Okay. Next, we're going to add something for the displacement because it's still a little bit too smooth. So, and actually now we can... Now we can add in a ground plane. The ground plane is nice because it allows us to see how light is actually interacting. Alright, so not intersecting, that's good. And we're going to make this brighter so we can actually see what's going on. I'm going to make it 500. And save it again because, like I said, Blender likes to freeze up. Okay, so we can see that the light's coming through, and that's all well and good. But it doesn't really look like Obsidian yet. So, I'm going to keep working on that. Next I'm going to put in a procedural texture. This is going to be a noise texture. And I'm going to up the scale to, let's say 100, up the detail to... I'm just making these numbers up, so, I mean, don't like trust me on them or something. And we're going to add in a math node, and we're going to multiply this by 0.05. So this just breaks it up ever so slightly, and I'm also going to up this roughness to 0.01. There we go. So now this is looking much more like Obsidian. This doesn't really look like Obsidian though, because if you've ever seen Obsidian, it's very black. So what we're going to do is save and go to light paths, up volume from 0 to 2 because we're going to be using volumetrics, and add in a shader volume absorption. Volume. And we're going to crank up this density to like 20. Okay. So now this looks much more like Obsidian. And one thing we can do to check this is we can actually rotate it on the y-axis by 90. Bring it up. And look at the light going through it. So if I bring it up so that it's covering up the light. Okay. So light is coming through, and it should be coming through less at the... more of it should be coming through at the edges, which it is. And if we look at it, the direction the light's coming from, let's see, we've got these nice highlights coming. We've also got this crap going on here. These are called fireflies. And they're basically a rendering artifact because of the limits of the, basically a renderer. Also, I feel like 20 isn't enough. Let's give it 30. Yeah. I've also noticed that Obsidian has a slightly red color in some cases, so I'm going to slightly up the red. Just a tiny bit. Yeah. It's hard to notice, but it's there. Slightly. You can notice it's kind of around here. There's a slight reddish tint here. I'm actually going to slightly redden this. I'm actually going to bring this up a little bit. Let's bring these down to 0.9. That's too much. Let's go 0.95 on them. Oops. 0.95. There we go. There, that gives it a slight reddish tint. You might not notice it, but it's there. And actually, I'm going to up this roughness again. This 0.01 isn't really working for me. Let's give it 0.05. That's getting there. However, I don't like the direction that the noise texture is going in, so I'm going to add a texture coordinate and